Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. 6 years apart, one wrong number. And destiny answered the call. On a freezing winter night in Boston, a woman named Clara Evans sits on a park bench, clutching her sleeping twins beneath a tattered blanket. She sends a desperate text asking for shelter, but fate delivers it to Ethan Cole, the billionaire she once loved and lost. When he finds her shivering in the snow, the past crashes back like the storm around them. Secrets buried for years begin to surface, and the man who once let her go will do anything to protect the family he never knew was his. This is a story of forgiveness, love reborn, and the courage to come home again, even when winter seems endless. Boston didn't whisper that night. It howled. The kind of cold that sliced through wool and skin alike, leaving the city wrapped in a sharp, colorless silence. Snow drifted in the air, not gently, but in frantic swirls that clung to the edges of streetlights and fire escapes. Down on Tremont Street, beneath a flickering lamppost, a woman sat on a worn metal bench. Her name was Emma Carter. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, though it did little to stop the wind. In her arms, 2 small children slept, their heads pressed against her chest, their breaths rising like fragile clouds in the icy air. She shifted slightly, careful not to wake them, pressing her cheek to the crown of her daughter's hair. The child's skin was cold, too cold. A bus rumbled by, headlights cutting through the snow for a brief moment before vanishing down the hill. No one stopped. No one ever did at this hour. The city that glittered for everyone else had turned its back on her long ago. Emma lowered her gaze to the cracked screen of her phone. 1% battery. The red icon blinked like a warning she no longer had the strength to heed. Her thumb hovered over a name she hadn't called in years. Sophie, an old friend from another life. Pride whispered that she could endure one more night, that she'd find shelter somewhere by dawn. But hunger and cold had louder voices. Her fingers, stiff and trembling, typed a message. "Can we stay with you tonight?" "Just until morning. The kids are freezing." She pressed send, unaware that her thumb, numb from the cold, had slipped. One wrong digit. One small mistake. 4 blocks away, on the top floor of a glass tower that overlooked the sleeping city, Ethan Hale stepped out of a boardroom. The last meeting of the night had stretched past midnight, leaving the air in the office heavy with the dull hum of fluorescent lights. He loosened his tie, exhaling a breath that carried more exhaustion than relief. His phone buzzed. Expecting another financial update, he glanced down and froze. "Can we stay with you tonight?" "Just until morning. The kids are freezing." For a second he thought it was a scam, another missent message, but then his eyes caught the name at the top of the screen. Emma. The world seemed to still, the years collapsing into a single, sharp heartbeat. 6 years, no calls, no goodbyes, just silence where there used to be laughter. And now, her name, her voice, flickered back into his life through a message meant for someone else. Outside, snow battered the windows like it wanted in. Ethan's reflection stared back at him, older, colder, but suddenly alive with something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't think. He didn't plan. "Tremont Street," he told his driver, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. Back on that lonely bench, Emma's phone died in her hand. She stared out at the blur of headlights passing by, her breath shallow. The twins stirred, their small fingers tightening around hers. Somewhere, not far away, a car engine roared to life, and fate, after 6 long years, began to move again. The car cut through the frozen streets like a silent promise. Ethan's gaze stayed on the windshield, but his mind was already miles away, tangled in memories he had buried beneath years of work and silence. Back on Tremont Street, Emma lifted her head when a pair of headlights slowed near the bench. The air was so still she could hear the snow landing on her coat. She didn't know yet that the man behind the wheel was the ghost of her own past. 6 years earlier. The city had been warmer then, humming with spring rain and ambition. Emma had worked as an event planner at one of Boston's luxury hotels, the kind that smelled of lilies and polished marble. She remembered that day as vividly as a dream she couldn't quite let go. Ethan Hale had walked in wearing a charcoal suit and a look that turned heads without meaning to. He was there for a charity gala, one she was coordinating, and he'd been polite, almost too polite, when he asked if she could help fix the seating chart that his assistant had ruined. What began as a favor became a conversation. And then another, and another. She had expected him to be arrogant, the kind of man born into boardrooms and old money. But Ethan had surprised her. He listened. He laughed easily, as though wealth hadn't hardened him. He remembered the name of her favorite coffee and brought it the next morning, as a thank you for saving my reputation. By the end of that summer, they were inseparable. Their love was quiet but certain, the kind that didn't need grand gestures. She'd never felt so seen, but love, she would learn, was rarely enough when power was involved. The first cracks appeared the night she met his uncle, Richard Hale, a man with a handshake that felt like ownership. Richard had smiled too easily, asked too many questions about her background, her family, her intentions. He didn't see her as a person, just a potential threat to a fortune he believed belonged to bloodline and legacy. Later that night, Ethan had brushed it off. "He's old-fashioned," he'd said, wrapping his arms around her. "He'll come around." He never did. Weeks turned into whispered warnings, anonymous letters, subtle threats that grew louder with every passing day. Emma tried to ignore them until she couldn't anymore. Until she saw the fear in Ethan's eyes when his uncle threatened to destroy not just her career, but her life. Then came the night everything changed. They were supposed to meet at the waterfront, their secret place, where the city lights danced across the water like stars that had fallen too close. Emma had planned to tell him she was pregnant. She remembered standing there, clutching the small ultrasound photo in her pocket, waiting for him to appear. But he never came. Hours later, she learned why. Richard had sent her a message in Ethan's name, cold, final words that shattered her. "Don't contact me again. It's over." She tried calling, but every number was blocked. Every door she knocked on was closed. And when she finally gathered the courage to go to his building, the guards told her he'd left for London indefinitely. She'd stood there, numb, rain soaking through her clothes, realizing the man she loved had disappeared, or been made to disappear, without a single goodbye. So she ran. She left Boston with nothing but a suitcase and a secret that would change her life forever. The twins were born in a small town outside New Haven, where no one knew her name. She worked nights, studied by day, and learned to live with the ache that never really faded. Years passed. Seasons changed. She told herself she'd done the right thing, that keeping the children away from that world was the only way to protect them. But sometimes when she tucked them into bed, she'd catch the way her son's brow furrowed like Ethan's, or how her daughter smiled with the same quiet stubbornness, and the memories would come rushing back. She had built a fragile peace on top of the ruins of their love. But peace, she knew, could shatter with a single vibration of a phone. Now, in the present, as the snow thickened around her, Emma watched the approaching car slow to a stop. Its headlights cut through the white haze, washing over her like the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Her breath caught. The door opened. Ethan stepped out, older, sharper, but unmistakably him. For one suspended moment, the world fell silent. The years, the lies, the distance, they all collapsed into the space between two people who had once known everything about each other and now shared nothing but the weight of what was left unsaid. She didn't move. Neither did he. Until finally Ethan spoke, his voice rough with disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. "Emma, is it really you?" The wind carried her answer away before she could find the words. But the look in her eyes said what her voice could not. That love, no matter how deeply buried, never truly dies. The world seemed to hold its breath. Snow drifted in slow spirals between them, melting against the heat of headlights that painted the night in gold and silver. Emma sat frozen on the bench, her arms still around her children, as if afraid that moving might break the fragile illusion that he was really standing there. Ethan took a step closer. His breath came out in clouds, uneven, betraying the storm beneath his calm exterior. For 6 years he had imagined this moment, rehearsed what he'd say if he ever saw her again. Yet now words felt foreign. "Are they warm enough?" he asked finally, his voice low, roughened by disbelief. Emma blinked, startled by the question. "We'll manage," she murmured, adjusting the blanket around the twins. "You should go." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You texted me, Emma. You asked for help." "I didn't mean to." Her voice cracked. "It was a mistake. Then maybe it wasn't," he said quietly. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat, heavy, alive, unspoken. Then, from the bundle in her arms, a small cough broke through the cold. It was thin, dry, desperate. The sound hit him harder than any accusation could. "Come on," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "They need warmth. You all do." Before Emma could protest, he'd already shrugged off his coat and wrapped it over her shoulders. The scent of him, cedar and winter air, flooded her senses, stirring memories she had fought for years to forget. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "Then don't. Just get in the car." For a moment, she wanted to resist, to hold on to her pride, her independence, the fragile armor that had kept her standing. But when her daughter shivered against her chest, the decision was made for her. She nodded once, silent, and allowed him to help them into the back seat. The car moved through the snow-covered streets, city lights smearing into streaks of white and gold across the window. Emma sat between the twins, keeping her hands folded tight, as if afraid to touch anything that might remind her of the life she'd left behind. Ethan sat in front, watching the road with a focus that was less about driving and more about not looking back. The heater hummed softly, melting frost from their clothes. For the first time that night, the children slept without trembling. When they reached his building, a high-rise of glass and quiet wealth, Emma hesitated at the entrance. The marble lobby, the soft hum of the elevator, the faint scent of perfume from a passing neighbor, it all felt like another world. A world she no longer belonged to. Ethan swiped his keycard and held the door open. "It's warm inside," he said simply. She followed him in silence. The penthouse was understated but vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting. A soft fire glowed in the corner, its warmth spilling into the room. Ethan gestured toward the guest suite down the hall. "There's a room for you and the kids. Towels, blankets, whatever you need." Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. Just for tonight, he repeated, though the words lodged in his chest heavier than he expected. Later, when the twins were asleep, Emma stood by the window, staring down at the maze of city lights. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, wind-burned cheeks, a face that barely resembled the woman she used to be. Behind her, she could hear Ethan moving in the kitchen, the clink of plates, the soft hum of the kettle. He returned moments later with 2 mugs of tea. "You haven't eaten," he said, setting one beside her. She shook her head. "I'll manage." "You always say that," he said gently. She looked up, startled. "You remember that?" He smiled faintly. "I remember everything." For a heartbeat, the air thickened with everything left unsaid. The weight of the years pressed between them. Not quite anger, not quite forgiveness, but something trembling in between. "Why did you leave?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. His voice wasn't accusatory, just tired. Emma's hands tightened around the mug. She wanted to tell him everything, the threats, the lies, the night she'd waited for him by the harbor. But the words stuck in her throat. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said instead. "We survived. That's all that counts." Ethan's gaze hardened. "It matters to me." She turned away, pretending to study the skyline. "You should rest. It's late." "Emma." The way he said her name, low, deliberate, made her chest ache. She closed her eyes, willing the tears back. "Please," she whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is." He didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step closer, stopping just short of her. "I'm not here to make it harder," he said softly. "I just need to understand." Emma's breath trembled. "Some things don't need to be understood, Ethan. They just need to stay in the past." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire cracked quietly. Outside, snow fell against the glass like a memory refusing to fade. When dawn came, the city was draped in pale light. The twins stirred awake, laughter soft and uncertain. Ethan watched from the doorway as Emma brushed her daughter's hair, humming under her breath. For a fleeting second, it felt like something ordinary, like the life that could have been. But the illusion shattered when the girl coughed again, harsher this time. Emma's face drained of color. Ethan crossed the room instantly. "She needs a doctor." Emma hesitated, torn between fear and pride. "We can't, I'll handle it," he cut in. No arguments. His tone left no space for refusal. Within minutes, he had them bundled in coats, leading them toward the waiting elevator. The city outside glittered with new snow, hiding the danger still lurking in the shadows of their reunion. As the doors closed, Emma looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw not the billionaire she once loved, but the man who had never stopped caring. Still, in the quiet hum of the elevator, a thought echoed in her mind. If he knew the truth, the whole truth, would he still look at me the same way? The question lingered like a chill that no fire could chase away. Morning came with a gray, uncertain light. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets buried in quiet white. Ethan stood by the penthouse window, watching the city awaken while the scent of coffee filled the air. Behind him, the soft sounds of movement, Emma's voice, the shuffle of small feet, brought an ache he couldn't name. He hadn't realized how much he missed that sound. The hum of a home. The visit to the clinic had been brief, but tense. The pediatrician, a calm woman with tired eyes, confirmed what Ethan already feared. A mild respiratory infection, worsened by cold and exhaustion. Nothing serious, she'd assured Emma, but she needs rest, medicine, and warmth. Ethan had nodded, already reaching for his wallet before Emma could protest. On the drive back, she sat silent, her gaze fixed on the city blurring past the window. He didn't press her. Not yet. Now, back at the apartment, the twins napped peacefully in the guest room, and for the first time in hours, Emma allowed herself to breathe. She stood in the kitchen, fingers curled around a mug of tea, her eyes following the gentle steam that rose and vanished, like all the things she'd once believed would last. Ethan appeared beside her, sleeves rolled up, a faint warmth softening his usual reserve. "They'll be fine," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "They always are." He studied her, the way her posture stayed guarded, the way her eyes never lingered on him too long. "You don't have to be alone in this," he said. "I'm not," she replied quickly. "I have them." Ethan exhaled through his nose, half a sigh, half a laugh without humor. "That's not what I meant. I know." She set her mug down, turning away. "But it's the only way that works." The distance between them was barely a few feet, yet it felt like years. That evening, he offered to make dinner. Emma almost refused, but exhaustion and the quiet smell of roasted chicken won over her pride. The meal passed in relative silence, broken only by the soft chatter of the twins, small voices that filled the cavernous apartment with a warmth money couldn't buy. "Mom, can we stay here again tomorrow?" the little girl asked between bites. Emma hesitated. "We'll see," Ethan looked up. "You can, as long as you need." Her eyes met his briefly. A silent warning. Don't make promises you can't keep. After dinner, as the children colored on the living room rug, Ethan joined her by the sink. "You don't have to wash those," he said, reaching for a towel. "I'm used to doing things myself." "I know," he said softly. "That's what worries me." She froze for a second, the running water masking the tension in the air. "You don't get to worry about me anymore, Ethan." He set the towel down. "I never stopped." Her shoulders stiffened. "Don't do this." "Do what? Pretend the last 6 years didn't happen?" That's exactly what we should do, she said sharply, turning to face him. Because nothing good comes from digging them up again. Ethan's voice dropped. You think this is digging up the past. Emma, you showed up on a bench in the middle of a snowstorm with 2 kids. Don't, she snapped, her eyes flashing. Don't you dare say it like that. You have no idea what I went through. Then tell me, he said, stepping closer. Tell me so I can understand. She stared at him, trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of everything she'd buried. You can't understand, because you weren't there. You didn't see how far your uncle went to make sure I disappeared. The name hit him like a slap. Richard? Emma gave a hollow laugh. You sound surprised. I thought he'd let it go. After you left, he what? She cut in. Told you I ran off? That I used you? Ethan's silence was answer enough. Emma turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. I waited for you that night, Ethan. I waited until the sun came up. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind. But then I got that message. Don't contact me again. I thought you meant it. His breath caught. Message? She nodded, voice trembling. From your number. Ethan's face drained of color. He reached for his phone as if somehow the truth could still be there. I never sent that. I swear to God, Emma, I never would have said that to you. Her laughter broke. Brittle, wounded. It doesn't matter anymore. Yes, it does. He took another step, his voice rough, raw, because it means someone wanted us apart. Someone succeeded. The sound of the twins laughing from the other room pulled them both back from the edge. Emma pressed her palms against the counter, forcing her voice steady. Please, not now. They can't hear this. Ethan inhaled slowly, nodding. All right. Not now. But his eyes said something else, a promise that this conversation wasn't over. The next morning, he left early for the office. Emma found a note on the counter, written in his precise handwriting. Call me if the kids need anything. I'll be back for dinner. She folded it carefully, unsure why her hands were shaking. At his office, Ethan stared at the city skyline while his assistant rattled off updates. He wasn't listening. His mind was still replaying her words. Richard made me disappear. He knew his uncle had influence. Ruthless, calculating, protective of the Hale name. But to manipulate lives, to destroy love, that was a darkness even he hadn't expected. When his assistant left, Ethan picked up the phone. Find everything you can on Emma Carter. Rental history, employment, legal records. Quietly. That evening, he returned home with takeout and a quiet determination that made the air around him heavier. Emma noticed the tension in his jaw but said nothing. The twins greeted him like he'd been gone for days. He smiled, a real one this time, helping them set the table. The small domesticity of it all felt almost surreal. When the children were asleep, Emma found him at his desk, sleeves rolled, papers spread before him. You're working late, she said, trying to piece together 6 years of silence. Don't, she said softly. You'll only find ghosts. He looked up, eyes unreadable. Maybe, but ghosts still leave footprints. Her lips parted, but no words came. 2 nights later, while Ethan put the twins to bed, Emma stood on the balcony. The city glittered below, endless and indifferent. The wind carried whispers of their old life. Laughter, champagne, the sound of his voice saying her name like a promise. He joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. You're thinking about leaving, he said, not as a question. She didn't answer. I can see it, he continued. The way you pack their things a little more each day. The way you look at the door like it's safer than staying. Emma looked down into her cup. You've always been too observant. He smiled faintly. And you've always been too proud. That earned a small laugh, the first real one in days. Ethan, she said after a pause. If I stay, nothing changes. Richard still has power. He can ruin you. He'll ruin me again. Ethan's tone turned steel. Let him try. You don't mean that. I do, he said, his eyes meeting hers unwavering. I lost you once because I trusted the wrong man. I won't make that mistake again. The wind picked up, tugging strands of her hair across her face. He reached out without thinking, brushing them aside. His fingers lingered, not a touch of possession, but of memory. "Emma," he whispered, "whatever happens next, we face it together." For a moment, she let herself believe him. Believe that maybe, after everything, love could be stronger than the past. But deep down, a voice whispered what she already feared, that Richard Hale wasn't done with either of them, and the storm they'd survived was only the beginning. The days that followed felt deceptively calm, like the stillness before a storm that already knew its path. Ethan had become quieter, more deliberate. Each morning he left for the office earlier than usual, returning late with a look that didn't belong to the man Emma once knew. Not the dreamer. Not the romantic, but someone forged by resolve. Emma sensed it but didn't ask. She had learned long ago that some truths only revealed themselves when they were ready to burn. That afternoon, the twins were coloring by the window while Ethan stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. His tone was low, clipped. "Get me everything on Richard Hale's offshore accounts," he said to his investigator, "and the board meeting minutes from 6 years ago, the quarter after I left for London." He hung up before the man could reply. When he turned, Emma was watching him, a quiet storm behind her eyes. "You're digging again," she said. He didn't deny it. "Because you were right. He's behind everything. And I'm done pretending not to see it." Her voice trembled, caught between anger and fear. "Ethan, you don't understand what he's capable of." "I do," he said softly. "That's why I can't let him win again." 2 days later, a courier arrived with a manila envelope. Inside were copies of transactions, signed approvals, and one familiar signature, Richard Hale, tied to a slush fund that had quietly funneled money through shell companies. Fraud, bribery, political payoffs, the kind of evidence that could destroy reputations, careers, entire legacies. Ethan's jaw tightened as he flipped through each page. At the bottom, stapled to the last report, was something else, a private communication log. His own emails from years ago, rerouted through Richard's private server. Among them was one he'd never seen before, a message to Emma. His pulse stuttered. The date matched the night she'd waited for him by the harbor. The message read, "Don't contact me again." "It's over." Ethan's chest went cold. The proof was there. The manipulation, the deception, the stolen years. That night, he found Emma standing on the balcony again. The wind was sharp. Her hair whipped across her face, but she didn't move when he stepped beside her. He handed her the printed page. "You should see this." She hesitated, scanning the words. Her lips parted, a breath catching in her throat. "So it really wasn't you?" "No." His voice was low, heavy with guilt. "But I should have known. I should have fought harder to find you." Emma shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "He made sure you couldn't. You were halfway across the world before I even realized what happened." Ethan looked out over the city, his knuckles white against the balcony rail. "I won't let him get away with it. Not again. Ethan, please, no." He turned to her, eyes burning with a quiet fury. "He destroyed us once. He doesn't get a second chance." The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. By mid-afternoon, the boardroom of Hale Infrastructure was a stage set for war. Polished mahogany, walls of glass, and at the head of the table, Richard Hale, smiling like a man who'd already won. "Ethan," he greeted smoothly, rising from his chair. "You look tired. I trust this is important?" Ethan set a folder on the table. "You could say that." He opened it, sliding the papers across. "Fraudulent transfers, embezzlement, political bribes. You've been using company resources to fund personal deals for years." Richard's smile didn't falter. Not yet. "Those are serious accusations, nephew, and easily dismissed without proof." Ethan's tone stayed calm. "You're right, which is why I brought proof." He nodded toward the conference monitor. The investigator's report appeared on screen. Spreadsheets, signatures, transaction trails. Gasps rippled across the boardroom. Richard's mask cracked for the first time. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "Oh, I do," Ethan replied. "You used my name to destroy someone I loved. You forged a message to end her life with me, and now you're going to answer for every lie you ever told." "Be careful, Ethan," Richard said, his tone low and venomous. "You're not the only one with something to lose." Ethan leaned forward, voice like steel. "You already lost everything the moment you touched what was mine." For a long, unbearable moment, neither moved. Then Richard's composure snapped. "You think you can take my company?" he spat. "This board is loyal to me." Ethan straightened, looking each member in the eye. "Not anymore." He turned to the CFO. "Gentlemen, you've all seen the documents. You can side with corruption or with truth. The choice defines you." Silence filled the room. One by one, hands began to rise, not for Richard. "For Ethan." Richard's jaw clenched, fury twisting his features. "You have no idea what you've started," he growled. "On the contrary," Ethan said, gathering the papers. "For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing." Hours later, Ethan walked into the penthouse, exhaustion and adrenaline clashing beneath his skin. Emma turned from the window, reading everything in his eyes before he spoke. "It's done," he said quietly. "He's finished." Her lips parted in disbelief. "What did you do?" "I told the truth." She exhaled shakily, then stepped closer. "Ethan, you don't understand what men like him do when they lose." "I'm counting on it." She frowned. "That's not funny," he met her gaze. "I'm not joking." The phone rang before either of them could speak again. Emma reached it first. The voice on the other end was smooth, measured, and unmistakably cruel. "Clara Evans," Richard's voice drawled. "Or should I say Emma Carter now? It's been a long time." Her grip tightened. "What do you want?" "To remind you that your presence in Boston is temporary," Richard said. "You may think Ethan won, but I always finish what I start." "You can't scare me." He chuckled, low and dark. "Then you've forgotten how the world works. Ask yourself, Emma, can you protect them?" The line went dead. Emma stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to her ear. Ethan's voice cut through the silence. "Who was that?" She turned pale. "Your uncle." Ethan's eyes hardened. "He's not going to touch you. I swear it." That night, a storm rolled over Boston again. Thunder rumbling like distant anger. Emma couldn't sleep. Every sound felt like a threat, every flash of lightning like a warning. She slipped quietly into the twins' room, watching them sleep, innocent and unaware. Ethan appeared in the doorway, barefoot, his expression softening when he saw her. "You should rest," he whispered. She shook her head. "He won't stop, Ethan. You know that." "I know." He stepped closer, brushing his hand lightly against her arm. "But this time I'm ready." "Promise me," she said, her voice breaking. "Promise me you won't let this turn you into him." He hesitated. Then, with quiet conviction, "I promise." The next morning, news spread like wildfire. The board had voted unanimously to suspend Richard Hale pending investigation. His empire was collapsing. Reporters camped outside the headquarters, flashing cameras into the winter sun. But behind the victory, Ethan knew something darker was coming. Men like Richard didn't vanish quietly. They retaliated. That evening, as the first flakes of snow began to fall again, a black car idled outside the penthouse. Inside, a figure watched the lighted windows above, waiting, patient, smiling. Upstairs, Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine. Emma joined him by the window, her expression wary. "Maybe this is over," she said softly. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, his voice held something like peace. "It's not over," he said. "It's just beginning." The wind howled outside, carrying with it a sense of both danger and destiny. Somewhere below, a phone lit up in a waiting car. A text appeared on the screen. "Phase 2 begins tonight." And as snow began to fall heavier against the glass, neither Ethan nor Emma knew. The real fight for their love, for their family, was only just beginning. The storm had passed, but Boston still looked bruised in the morning light. The streets shimmered with puddles that reflected a gray sky, and the city's hum returned slowly, hesitant, like someone relearning how to breathe. Inside the penthouse, the world was quieter. The twins played softly in the living room, building towers from wooden blocks, unaware of the chaos that had nearly pulled their family apart. Ethan stood by the window, watching them with a stillness that was new. He had spent so long fighting, for truth, for justice, for something to fill the void, that standing still now felt foreign. Behind him, Emma appeared, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Her hair was loose, her expression tired but calm. She handed him one without a word. He took it, their fingers brushing briefly, a touch that carried more understanding than any apology ever could. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "A little," he said. "You?" She smiled faintly. "You know I never do when it rains." He glanced at her, remembering the way she'd once fallen asleep to storms, safe in his arms. The memory flickered like a candle in the dark, fragile, but still burning. Later that afternoon, Ethan received the call. Richard Hale had been arrested. The charges were official: fraud, embezzlement, obstruction. Years of corruption now laid bare for the world to see. Ethan didn't smile. He simply listened, thanked the investigator, and hung up. Emma was folding laundry when he told her. "So it's over," she said quietly. "It's over for him," Ethan replied. "For us, I'm not sure it ever really ends." She nodded slowly, setting a folded towel aside. "Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe some scars just stay to remind us what we survived." Ethan looked at her then, really looked, at the woman who had faced the storm alone, who had raised 2 children while carrying the weight of his absence. "You're stronger than I ever was," he said. Emma laughed softly. "No, just tired of being afraid." That evening they took the twins for a walk. The snow had turned to slush, but the air was gentle, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. The city glowed with the soft amber of streetlights reflecting on wet pavement. They ended up on Tremont Street, the same stretch where everything had begun. The old bench still stood beneath the lamppost, paint-chipped, metal-worn. The sight of it stopped Emma in her tracks. For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes glistening as memories washed through her, the cold, the hunger, the hopelessness of that night. Ethan followed her gaze. "It feels like a lifetime ago," he said. "It was," she whispered. "A whole other life." The twins ran ahead, giggling as they chased each other around the lamppost. Their laughter echoed against the quiet street, bright, alive, unbroken. Emma sat down on the bench, running her gloved hand across its surface. "This is where you found us," she said softly. "And where I found myself," Ethan added. She looked up at him, eyes warm beneath the fading light. "You really believe people can change?" He sat beside her, exhaling. "I think we don't change. We just finally become who we were supposed to be." For a while, they sat in silence, watching the twins play. The city moved around them, cars passing, footsteps echoing, a life that no longer felt like it was running away. When they returned home, the air felt lighter. The twins fell asleep quickly, exhaustion curling them into soft dreams. Ethan stood by their door, watching for a long moment. "They look so much like you," he said quietly. Emma smiled. "They have your stubbornness." He turned to her, his voice low. "Emma, I don't know how to make up for the years I missed, but if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do," he said. "Because love isn't just about finding each other again. It's about choosing each other, every day." She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath against her skin. "Then choose me, Ethan," she whispered, but not out of guilt. "Choose me because you still want to." His hand rose, brushing a tear from her cheek. I never stopped. Weeks passed. Winter began to fade. The snow on the rooftops melted into thin rivulets that glistened beneath the early spring sun. One morning, Ethan drove them to a construction site in South Boston. The twins pressed their faces to the car window, eyes wide as they saw a new building rising, its walls bright, its sign freshly painted. "What is this place?" Emma asked. Ethan smiled. "A project I've been working on. Affordable housing. Safe, warm, built for families who've had nowhere to go." She blinked, realizing. "Because of that night. Because of you," he said. "Because no one should ever have to sit on a bench in the cold with nowhere to turn." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers sliding between his. "You're not the man I left, Ethan." He squeezed gently. "No. But I think I've finally become the man you believed I could be." The project launched a month later. Reporters came, cameras flashed, and headlines spoke of redemption and renewal. But amid the noise, the most important moment was quiet. A photo captured of Ethan smiling at Emma while the twins ran through the courtyard. It went viral. Not because of scandal or fame, but because people saw something rare. Love that had survived both distance and damage. That night, when the city lights glowed soft and golden, Emma stood once more by the penthouse window. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, but for the first time, she didn't feel small against it. Ethan walked up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him, closing her eyes as he rested his chin on her shoulder. "You ever think about how different it could have been?" she murmured. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember, if things hadn't fallen apart, maybe we wouldn't have found what really mattered." She smiled faintly. "And what's that?" He kissed the side of her head. "You, them, us." Outside, the wind whispered through the city. Gentle this time, carrying the sound of laughter, of life continuing. Emma turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the glow of the city lights. "So," she said, her voice soft but sure, "is this the end of our story?" Ethan's lips curved into a slow smile. "No," he said. "This is the beginning." The camera of life pulled back, 2 adults and 2 children framed against the night skyline, warmth spilling from the windows behind them. The bench on Tremont Street still stood beneath its lamppost, empty now, but no longer lonely. And somewhere in the distance, as the city slept, a whisper lingered in the winter air, not of loss or regret, but of love rediscovered and finally set free. The year turned quietly. Boston exhaled winter's last breath, the kind that lingered in the air just long enough to remind you how far you'd come. The city was softer now. Streetlights shimmered on wet cobblestone, and the river flowed beneath a blanket of mist. For most, it was just another evening, but for Ethan and Emma, it felt like coming full circle. They were walking hand in hand through Tremont Street, the twins skipping ahead, their laughter carrying through the cold. The same street, the same bench, but this time, everything had changed. The old lamppost still leaned slightly to one side, casting its familiar golden halo. The bench, once a symbol of desperation, now stood quietly beneath it, a witness to both endings and beginnings. Emma stopped, her breath visible in the chill air. "You remember this place?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I'll never forget it." For a moment, they just stood there, surrounded by the hum of the city and the muffled sound of distant music. The bench gleamed faintly beneath the lamplight, and Emma could almost see her younger self, the woman who had sat there with trembling hands and 2 sleeping children, unaware that hope was already on its way. She swallowed hard. "That night, I thought it was the end." Ethan turned to her, his gaze steady. "And it was. But some endings aren't meant to break us. They're meant to rebuild us." Emma smiled, her eyes glistening. "Funny how life brings us back to where it all started." "Maybe that's the point," he said. "To come back stronger, to finally understand what love really means." The twins ran up to them, cheeks flushed, arms full of snow. "Mom, Dad, look. We built a snow heart." They pointed toward the bench, where 2 small piles of snow had been shaped into a heart under the lamplight. Emma laughed, a soft, melodic sound that melted something inside Ethan. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as the twins darted away again. "They don't even know what this place means," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Maybe that's a good thing. They don't need to know the pain, just the love that came after." A gust of wind blew through the street, scattering tiny flakes of snow around them. The city felt alive again, not in its noise or its movement, but in the quiet understanding that some stories don't end when the pain does. They end when healing begins. Later that night, back home, Emma stood by the window. The lights of the city glowed below, reflecting off the glass like tiny constellations. Ethan joined her, silent at first, his presence warm and grounding. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that text hadn't gone to you by mistake?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Then maybe fate would have found another way." She turned to him, amused. "You really believe that?" "I believe some people are meant to meet, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many storms they have to walk through." Emma looked down at the city, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'm glad we didn't give up on each other." He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "You were never the one who gave up," he said. "I was, but you gave me a second chance, and that's something I'll never stop being grateful for." The snow began again, soft, slow, like the world had decided to start over one more time. Outside, the bench on Tremont Street sat under the falling flakes, quiet and timeless. It had seen cold and hunger, heartbreak and reunion. Now it simply existed, a silent witness to the truth that love, no matter how broken, can always find its way home. Ethan lifted his gaze toward the window, his reflection blending with Emma's beside him. "Boston's snow," he murmured, "used to make me feel cold." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now?" He smiled, the kind of smile that comes from peace, not perfection. "Now it reminds me of the night I found everything I'd lost. Boston was snowing again, but this time they weren't cold anymore.